Chapter 4. Mrs. O'Donnell was putting breakfast on the table the next morning when the Danton family came into the dining room. There was platters of eggs and fried bacon, fried potatoes, and pitchers of molasses. "Pull up your chairs and start eating," she called cheerfully as they entered. "The rest of the folks staying here ate earlier." Scarcely were they seated when she passed a plate stacked high with biscuits, quite the largest one Celeste had ever seen. "Sourdough," she answered the questioning look on Celeste's face. "Take one, take two." The plate made the rounds of the table, with everyone helping themselves. Mrs. O'Donnell buzzed cheerfully about, filling cups with coffee and talking a blue streak all the while. "I reckon you people will be going out to your new place today," she said. "Hope you like it." "Thank you," Papa responded politely. Celeste and Perry noticed he did not say they would go, which meant he had not decided yet, or, having done so, was not willing to announce it. Mrs. O'Donnell was urging another cup of coffee on Papa when Mr. Jack Scott came in the front door of the boarding house. He saw the Dantons, nodded absently to them, and made his way back to his wife's room. "Poor young fellow," Mrs. O'Donnell murmured. "He's got his hands more than full, just after he's fixed that place of his so nice and all." Breakfast over, Celeste and Perry went out on the front porch, while Papa and Mamma retired to their room. Michelle seemed a bit uncertain about what to do. Finally she offered to help Mrs. O'Donnell with the dishes, a kindness which sent the good woman into a great twitter of thanks. "Do you suppose," Perry asked Celeste, once they were out of earshot of the grown-ups, "that Papa truly means to go back to New Orleans?" "I don't know," Celeste admitted. Perry thought some more. This morning it appeared all the more sure Papa had not found things to his liking here. Silence fell upon them. By and by, Mr. Scott, having finished his visit with his wife, came back out of the door. "Good morning," Perry responded politely. "How is your wife?" Celeste asked. "Oh, so it's you two kids again." Mr. Scott seemed surprised at seeing them. "My wife, she is no better." He looked tired and worn, every bit as old as Papa. "I'm going to have to take her back to the East Texas," he told them. "And leave your good farm?" Perry inquired. "How do you know?" "Oh, yeah, I remember I told you about my place." "Yeah, I have to leave it, Bub." "It's too bad," Perry sympathized. "You're dead for sure right, Bub. I mean, Perry, especially since I can't find anyone to take it off my hands." "You mean," Perry inquired earnestly, "that you wish to sell your good farm, and you can find no buyer?" "You've said a mouthful. I gotta sell it for cash, and that's what most people around here don't have. Land, yes, sections and sections of land, but money, no." He stood up. "Well, I reckon I better be moving along. I want to talk to a few more people." Perry also rose. "Wait, Mr. Scott," he implored. I do not know, but perhaps, my father would wish to talk with you about this farm." Papa and Mr. Jack Scott sat together on the porch of the boarding house. They had talked a long time. Mamma listened quietly, knitting away at a great rate. Celeste and Perry and Michelle were also on the porch, but all save Papa and Mr. Scott remained silent. Papa had said his entire family should stay, since the decision concerned them all, but anyone could see that in a matter of such great importance, Papa alone must do all the talking. "This farm of yours," Papa said. "Tell me about it." Mr. Scott seemed anxious to do this very thing. There was a house, he explained, small but good enough. There was a windmill. This alone made the place of great value in the country where water was so hard to come by. There was a 30-acre field, plowed and fenced, ready to be planted. "I snaked those posts up out of the canyon myself on the shares," Mr. Scott bragged. "I had to give half to the man who owned the land they grew on, but it was worth it." Papa nodded understandingly. "I've got a corral fenced and sort of a shed. There's a cow and her calf in it. Got a wagon and a team and a sod-busting plow, too." "So," Papa asked, "how big is the farm of yours?" "A quarter section," Mr. Scott told him. "Oh, this other land I looked at. This was much more. A full section, I believe." Sure, and it's at least 10 miles from town and doesn't have a thing on it. That's right, Papa admitted. My place is only 4 miles from Marcy. The kids could ride to school once it started. True, Papa agreed, a gleam of interest in his eyes. He turned to face Mr. Scott directly. If it is so good, this place of yours, he asked, why aren't there many who would buy it from you? Because, Mr. Scott answered, I need cash to take Myra back home and get her in a hospital. People here have all the money tied up in land. That's why. Papa rubbed his chin reflectively. Tell you what, Mr. Scott continued, I've got a few cows, 3 with their calves, running out on the range. I'll throw them in. Fact of the matter, I'll even donate a pile of wood stacked up back of the house. You'll appreciate that once your wife starts cooking. Myra says you can have the furniture. It's not much, but you can manage with it. That sounds good, Papa said thoughtfully. Why don't you come see it for yourself? Mr. Scott suggested. It won't cost you anything to take a look. All right, Papa agreed. I will look. I do not promise to buy, but I will look. My wagon and team are just across the street, Mr. Scott said. I'll drive you out. Papa was back by noon. Even before he said a word, his family knew things had gone better this time. Celeste and Perry, who had been waiting for him on the porch, now followed him back to the room where Mamma and Michelle were waiting. So you liked it, Mamma said. Yes, Papa was thoughtful. Yes, he repeated, it is just as he said. A fine place. Not so large as the one we saw yesterday, but with so much more on it. Mamma looked pleased. How much will it cost? She asked practically. Papa named a price. With Philip's heritage, you can pay for it, Mamma said. There will be enough. Papa nodded absently. There is something else, however, he went on. Mamma looked questioningly at him. It is the matter of the agents who paid our fare here. They did this believing I would buy land from them once we arrived. And now, if I buy from someone else... He let his voice trail off, but all of them knew what it meant. Would it be dishonest of him to buy Mr. Scott's farm instead of the land Mr. Gibson had shown Papa? But as soon as you say this farm of Mr. Scott's is a much better investment. And besides, you did not sign a guarantee to buy once you arrived, Mamma reminded him. You only said you would look and think about buying. I can't imagine all the others who came will buy either. With us it is different, Papa reminded her. Our entire family came. Which of course was true. The Dantons' fare represented a much greater cost to the land agents. There is another thing, Papa continued. I am from another country, a foreigner as it were. I must start off right, with a clean slate. Perry and Celeste felt their hearts sink down to their very shoes. Could it be that Papa would feel honor-bound to buy land from Mr. Gibson, rather than take advantage of the fine offer Mr. Scott had made to him? I have thought the matter through, Papa went on. I'm going to buy him Scott's place, but I'm also going to pay Mr. Gibson for our tickets to the Panhandle. Oh, Clyde, Mamma protested. That'll leave us scarcely any money at all. What will we do for cash until we harvest the crop? Of course, Mamma did not want Papa to be dishonest, but all the same she was thinking of how little money would be left if he carried out his plan. I will find work of some sort, Papa told her. There must be something here that I can do. What? Mamma asked practically. As of yet I do not know, but if a man truly wants to find a job, usually it is possible. Perry could not stand another minute. He made his way to Papa's side. I too will look for a job, he declared. Celeste ran to join them. And I! Papa's face was bright, as though the sun were shining on it. He put an arm around each of them. My dear children, he said, it is good to know you will help. That way the place will seem more ours. Of course, Papa, Michelle said quietly. We will all do our part. Mamma sighed. I know you are doing the right thing, Clyde. Together we will manage. She rolled up her knitting. Come, Michelle, we should start packing. Papa stood up. I am glad you see the matter as I do, he told Mamma. Of course I knew you would. Now I must go, for there are business matters to be taken care of. if the sale is to be tight and legal. He kissed them all. I won't be any longer than necessary, he promised, and he walked out of the room. The Danton family could see the house from a long way off. Celeste thought it looked lonely and forsaken, sitting there on the flat and open prairie. Perhaps it would be glad to have people come live in it. Houses were not meant to be so empty. Now it was no more than a small gray blob on the face of the prairie. Either the paint had fallen off, or there had never been any to begin with. Some cattle grazed in the distance. Are any of them ours? Perry asked hopefully. Could be, Papa told him. Of more interest to you is the one inside the corral at the house. That one you will be responsible for milking. Oh. Just in time, Perry remembered his offer to help, and he did not protest the assignment. Papa kept his eyes on the horses, guiding them in the direction he wanted them to go. Once the captain of the Marie Lavalliere, the ship which had brought the Dantons from France, had allowed Perry and Celeste to accompany him to the bridge. In some ways this was a similar experience. There the ship being directed through water, here Papa guiding the wagon through a sea of grass which parted to make way for them as the water had parted before the ship. In the wagon, as had been true of the ship, were all the possessions owned by the family. Beyond their clothes, these were a few, for Papa had said it was well to not be burdened with many things when coming to a new land. But such as were belonged to them. It was their wagon, their team which drew it. Moreover, it was their very own house toward which they went. The thought gave Celeste a feeling of pride. When Mrs. O'Donnell had discovered the Dantons had brought the Scott place, she was full of bustling kindness. It is mighty good to know we have a family moving in, she declared. We need families. You're here in good time. Still not too late to plant a garden. From her own supply she had pressed seeds and plants upon Mama. Turnips, lettuces, radishes, beans, and squash. Some onion sets as well, and a few cabbage plants. They probably won't all grow, she said cheerfully, but some of them will, if you water them. Lucky thing you got that windmill. She also gave Mama something else, which Celeste knew would be prized as much, or probably more, than the vegetables. It was a small geranium in a tin bucket, with a red flower just ready to burst into bloom. I always say every house needs a red geranium on the kitchen windowsill, she told Mama. Mama had thanked her with tears in her eyes, Celeste noticed, and that all during the trip she kept her eyes on the plant. There were some groceries, too, for the Dantons were never one to fast. And of course, Mama insisted on soap and scouring powder. Celeste could foresee a lot of house cleaning would be in order. I do not believe I have ever felt air so clean and clear, Papa said. Plainly he was pleased with his bargain in the country. Not a sky so blue. Indeed, the sky above them as they drove along was blue as a china bowl. Across it a few white clouds floated like bits of meringue on the surface of a pudding. Occasionally a bird flew up from the grass, singing as it did so. Outside of these songs and the sound of the creaking of the wagon and horses' hoofs, there was a quietness, unless some member of the family spoke. Perry was watching the house and the cattle and the land over which they drove, but for me he was thinking. Papa might not have known about the farm. I was the one who met Mr. Scott. He knew he was always going to feel that in some very special way this place belonged to him. Well, here we are, Papa said as he stopped the team. And there it lay before them, the Dantons' farm in the panhandle of Texas. There was, as Mr. Scott had said, a small fenced-in spot, which must be the corral, for there the cow and the calf stood. A three-sided shed, constructed from some rough boards, opened into the corral. There was also the larger fenced field, plowed and ready for planting. The windmill creaked busily, as it pumped water into the tank. These things they all noticed, but it was the house which drew their chief interest. Celeste and Perry ran ahead, and even before Papa had tied the team to the corral fence, they were at the door. Go inside, Papa called to them. The door is unlocked. They opened the door and went in. Almost immediately, Mama and Papa and Michelle joined them. It really was very small. 3 rooms, 2 in front and a third making the upright part of the letter T. Celeste could see Mama's eyes sizing up the house. If she felt disappointment at the smallness of it, she hid the fact. Perhaps after seeing the land yesterday, with no house at all, this looked like a palace to her. "We will cook and eat in the kitchen," Mama planned. The kitchen held a stove, a table, a small cupboard, and 2 wobbly-looking chairs. But as Mr. Scott had said, they could manage with them. "You and Perry can make us a bench to put behind the table," Mama said, "so we can all have a place to sit as we eat." They went into the front rooms. In one was a bed, a small homemade table, a rocking chair, and a straight chair, also homemade. "This will be our room, Clyde," Mama ruled, "and we will also use it for a sitting room." In the other rooms there was absolutely nothing except dust and cobwebs. Mama made a grimace of distaste. That Mrs. Scott was certainly not a very good housekeeper, Michelle complained, doubtless not relishing the prospect of her part in removing the dust. "She was not well," Mama reminded Michelle. "It was nothing that can be not removed with soap and water and a little effort." Michelle did not answer. She had known that from the moment they walked into the room. "You will have to construct some sort of frame to hold the beds in here," Mama continued. "Mrs. O'Donnell tells me that satisfactorily mattresses can be made by stuffing dried grass into sacks of sufficient size. This can be the girls' room. We will use curtains to divide it, and have a bed for Perry in this corner." "I will not share a room with the girls," Perry scowled. "I said it would have a dividing curtain." "Not even with curtains." "Do you have other plans?" Papa asked mildly. Strangely enough, he was not cross with Perry. "I do," he said, and indeed he did, otherwise he would not have dared to speak as he did. "There is an attic over the kitchen," he explained. "I know there is, for I see a trapdoor in the ceiling. Leading up to it are steps, a sort of ladder, flat against the wall." He led the way to the kitchen, and sure enough, there was the ladder he had mentioned, leading to the trapdoor. Perry began to ascend, while they were all watching him from below. He lifted the door, sending a cloud of dust down on them. Putting his arms on each side of the opening, he gave a big heave, and then he was in the attic out of sight. "It'll do very well," he called back to the others. "There is a small window at one end which gives light. I can fix things up nicely." He came back to the opening, put his foot upon the top step, and began to descend. His face was dirty, but extremely complacent, like that of an explorer who has just returned from making a great discovery. "If you grow 2 inches in width," Papa said, "you'll never be able to crawl through that opening. Or if you gain 5 pounds, you will break the ladder." "I'll make a larger opening," Perry promised, "and I'll build a stronger ladder." The attic was his. He would have no one discouraging him from occupying it. "Very well," Mama told him. "The attic is yours to do with as you like." "One thing more," Perry said. He might as well lay down his conditions at the beginning. "Nobody is to come up unless I say." "There you're safe," Mama agreed, shrugging her shoulders. "I would not climb that ladder and try to squeeze through that small opening for money." Conscious of Celeste's reproachful eyes upon him, Perry would have liked to tell her he meant to give her permission almost every time she wished. But having been so firm in the matter, he hesitated to take back the words immediately after he had spoken them. "Come on, Celeste," he suggested, hoping to take the sting out of his ruling. "Let's go have a look about the place." Already he realized that this farm, good as Papa's fortune had been in securing it, was not going to be all Perry had planned for his home in the Texas Panhandle. There would be a great deal of work to do. Cowboys would, apparently, not be riding their horses in great numbers about the house. True, the town was only 4 miles away, but trips would be infrequent. He was going to need Celeste to keep things from getting too lonesome, and it would be well to be nice to her now. "Explore afterward," Mama decided. "Now you must carry wood so I can cook something for us. Perry, you bring the groceries. Celeste, go for a bucket of water. Michelle, make ready to scrub this table so we can eat from it." When Mama took charge, everyone marched smartly, in order to carry out her errands. Each one now set about the task assigned him. "Clyde," Mama called after Papa, who had gone to assist Perry, Be sure to bring in the geranium. And already the place seemed like home.